Alright, hello to all. I'm here today in the Tier 10 American Tech Tree aircraft carrier, the USS Midway. We're on the map Crash Zone Alpha, mirror matchup on the Midway. We're top tier, so 8 to 10 matchmaking, so mixed matchmaking. 4 battleships, some mid-tier cruisers, and some destroyers, but overall a very easy matchup in terms of AA, so nothing too much to worry about. Now, the Tech Tree Midway has been a mainstay of the Tier 10 carriers for a long time. Pretty popular carrier, probably the most popular carrier. Whether it comes to inexperienced players or experienced players, just because her HE and flooding munitions are basically the easiest to use, not as picky as the armor-piercing armaments of the Hakuryu and later on the MVR. The MVR has, however, suffered some slight nerfs, lightning over there that I'm going to have some trouble hitting. I am currently rocking the Tiny Tims, mostly because in this patch 10.2 meta, there's been a lot of heavier, more heavily armored ships, a lot of Italian battleships, for example. Going to hit that Harugumo after preferentially. 1, he's bigger, and 2, well, he's a higher threat. Also worth more base experience if you're grinding experience, by the way. But mainly just because it's higher surface area. So I've opted to switch to Tiny Tims, which are vastly inferior to Havar's for dealing with destroyers aiming ahead of him, trying to get him to sail in, but obviously, as you can see, Havar's not ideally suited for attacking that type of armament. 5 ships there, so I'm moving away from it at the interim. We'll see if I need to move my carrier hull again. Now the Havar's, if they can score a pretty good hit, or sorry, the Tiny Tims, if they can score a good hit, still effective against destroyers, but usually you'll get kind of similar results to that against anyone who tries to dodge at all. Just not a very good reticle against destroyers ever since they did the changes. Baltimore over there. Probably the destroyer right in front of him, so I'm going to do a quick sweep. There's some kind of smoke ship there, which cannot be anything other than a destroyer. So it's the Benson, but I'm going to sweep for the guy who's in the cap first. Lots of AA here, so even though they're just tier 8s, you can see the combined flak puffs are quite deadly. Definitely not an FDR in terms of ignoring flak. You have a good lead. Sadly, kind of overshoot it. Don't want to stay too long in that kind of combined AA, so I'm just going to F out. But you can see even that tier 8 AA is enough to shred the relatively durable squadrons of the Midway. 2 Montanas up there, not something I want to tangle with. 2 destroyers. I could support my Holland. There's a smoked lightning in the cap. Oland reversing to kind of stay in. Hopefully my Oland doesn't take torps. Let's see if I can get some hits onto the Oland. Not too much AA here. I can use this mountain for these torpedo bombers to get a pretty good approach angle. Just going to try and force him from the cap. If I miss the target, then the Baltimore has extended out somewhat, so I should be able to hit him. I'm really just here to push him out, however. No luck there. Oh, Benson sliding in now for his turn in the meat grinder. So I'm gonna get probably misses on those torpedoes. Oh, I do get 2, 3 even. Not sure what they're hitting. Probably just the Baltimore and the Marco Polo. Baltimore took a significant chunk of AP from probably the Georgia, from the looks of it, and my team is very heavy on this side, so I'm perfectly happy to continue downward, down that way. Now normally I would maul the destroyers, but with the Baltimore this low, I do want to make sure that dies. Spotting does ensure he gets killed. Remember, I scored a flooding and some incapacitations. Marco Polo AA is kind of awful, so I'm just gonna make a dive here, try to score some fires, and you can see the very effective fire chance. Oland still attempting to contest the cap for some reason, but my refresh timer keeps me from immediately diving onto him. Gonna dive back out, more than likely. Holding down on the dive brakes. Arm early because he's moving toward me. And I want to not move the reticle too much. Let him glide in. And a fairly precise salvo from the Midway shows off her superior accuracy compared to the FDR for dealing with light targets. Don't want to broadside the Marco Polo, extremely powerful 16-inch guns. He's pushing into my entire team, basically. Now he's shielded by this island in the middle, so right now it's mostly just the Georgia, but even just the Georgia by himself with some occasional crossfires, it's going to be quite lethal. He's going to stay bow in, so I know what angle he's going to take. Maybe he shoots me, maybe he doesn't. He only has his 6 forward rifles, and the Marco Polo not exactly the most accurate from range. So I'm not overly worried, but definitely still not something you want to face tank for fun. Now the Torpedoes on the Midway, fairly decent part of our armament. Okay, I didn't think I'd have to pop the heel, but I decided to take a flak buff. He's turning in to respond to the Torpedoes, I suppose. But I'm just going to try and get those hits onto the bow. Got a double fire earlier, and 3 Torpedoes at 5,000 damage each on Alpha. Should be more than enough to dispatch him. And with that done, I can move back toward the map. Make sure you control your hull. This applies to all carriers, not just the Midway. Do note the Midway has her enormous 15-4 detection on this current patch. And we're cruising along. Now the Midway is favored, I would say, by carrier players, mainly because of its flexibility, especially for random battles at least. I would say the Midway is kind of the darling of carrier players out there if you know what's up, just because she has tools to deal with kind of everything. Unlike the more specialized territory of clan battles, these Torpedoes, by the way, are not very good against a ship like the Charles Martel. Unlike the more specialized environment, this guy's accelerating now, of clan battles, the Midway in random battles, just because it's capable of tackling all targets as long as you pick the right aircraft, is actually preferred by most carrier players, I would say. Gonna have to do a fairly wide net, not expecting to hit more than 2. If I hit anything more than 2, then that's just bonus. And he manages to take all 6. For what must be 30,000 Alpha, not the brightest, certainly. And we are eviscerating this teammate. Benson is in the cap. Probably has his smoke back. He's being spotted by Masashio, which gives me some early warning. We'll see if he tries to evade. Enemy Midway kind of behind on tempo, as you can see. Kind of doing the same thing I did earlier, diving through some DDs, which shouldn't have that much AA, but still do put up flag. And a Baltimore, which, while fearsome at tier 8, is mildly irritating to a tier 10 carrier. So again, arm early. The Midway has very, very good characteristics. Trying to get a good lead. Another 3 bombs down for 8,000 quickly allows my allies to dispatch him. And this game is a bit of a massacre, to the point where I can probably park in the center if I really want to. Montana over there behind some mountain cover, which means I can use this mountain to just put my bombs on the target. Now, the Midway bombs, 12,300. This is with the legendary module, which is kind of part of why I'm opting to take the Tiny Tims. I can just use these against destroyers who are unwitting enough to attempt to challenge my team's supremacy. You can see even with 9 planes, the Montana's AA is quite intact. This guy's exactly full health. 6 bombs, however, with that excellent pen for 10,000 damage and a fire. It's going to leave a bit of a dent on that Midway's, or on that Montana's hull form. So we got a fire that he DCP'd. You can see the damage not ticking, so obviously we're going to go back for flooding. Now in terms of flood chance, the Midway Torpedoes are not particularly impressive individually. However, there are quite a few of them. There's 2 Montanas pushing in the north. It's gonna drop a fighter, keep him from being lit up too much. Sashio Torpedoes heading in a very, very lethal vector toward that Montana. I'm gonna see if I can swing behind him. Don't want to take any forward angles. You can see that 6-kilometer Montana dual purpose AA. Pop the heel as a bit of a defensive shield per se. Give him some good lead. He's at speed. He pops a fighter, but I've already made my first attack, so I'm happy to oblige him. He decides to oblige me by taking 6 torpedoes. Sadly, no flooding. Unless he turns back out, not going to be a very good hit. He has a battleship rudder, so I doubt he actually will turn back out. But we're going to go in anyway. We're already committed. Just bracket with the 6. Don't anticipate getting a better target with that much HP left. You can see the Montana's AA is not so bad. Someone says chasing CV, not a very bright decision. But this is the World of Warships player base, so they do what they want. So enemy Midway put up a fighter, but I'm going to be able to evade both Montana AA and his fighter for the most part by taking this more northerly route for the most part. Just want to make sure I get that hit off. He's being chased by the Torpedoes. You can see AA continuing to trim planes. And with the last few, managed to score some hits. And I can make use of the Tiny Tims here to get some penetrations onto the side of that Montana hull. It's probably going to turn down to face my southerly Yamato. Still has that fighter. Looks like a fresh one from enemy Midway. So we're just going to eject some pilots there, make sure we don't lose them to the fighter. Not really looking for a follow-up strike, just looking to make one swift hit. You can see, even on a Midway, some okay damage, nothing impressive here. Losing planes slowly to attrition by AA. Pushing into some fairly heavy AA targets here in this particular match. But with the large reserves of the Midway at 16, 16, 20, not too much of a problem. Now if you choose not to take the deck space module, you'll have 14, 14, 18. But in spite of having this 15-4 protection because of the Midway's armored deck as a tier 10 carrier, I do highly recommend just taking the deck space. Much simpler of an option. Sashio has a pretty good lineup. I might screw his lineup, honestly, but don't really care. It's a random battle. Just here for my damage. Nice, simple lineup, though you will note that I had to hold that extremely steady in order to get those connections. 2 connections for me. Looks like he outran the rest of them to score a flood, which is currently ticking. The Asashio must have scored some hits on the way in, which I would imagine will have prompted a damage control. Gonna approach from the front, approaching from behind will delay my strike and makes it more difficult to score the hits, and he's the last one in, and well, this game was a cakewalk. And with 4 penetrations, we'll clean up the match. Midway is, as you can see, still a monster. 149,000 damage, 20 torpedo hits, 24 bomb hits, 5 incapacitations, only 6 rocket hits. The rockets really are a relatively ineffective part of your package these days, unfortunately. 5 incapacitations, 4 kills, 6 fires, 4 floods, and 3 defended ribbons. Team score wise, not sitting too high, the vast majority of my damage. In this case coming from battleships, some of which were not even tier 10s, which will cause that to happen. Damage wise, as you can see, because I'm attacking mostly battleships, you might be surprised to find that even with the legendary module, which amplifies the effects of my bombers, I dealt more damage with my torpedoes than bombs. These torpedoes are an integral part of the Midway's damage package, which is what influences my captain build. Now my captain build is a very generic captain build that you can run on basically every single carrier in the game, but we'll get to that right after we quickly take a look at our modules. So slot 1 I'm running the only aircraft module, so plus 20% returning squadrons, and aircraft engines in slot 2 for squadron engine boost. Slot 3 I'm running a bit of torpedo speed. We no longer have access to torpedo acceleration, which is something I used to run in the captain tree, well, not in the same form. We don't take the new one because the new one is extremely bad. So I'm running torpedo speed in slot 3. The other option is, of course, torpedo aim time. As you saw there in that last match, the aim time on the Midway torpedo bombers is extremely long, so getting the extra 5 seconds can be beneficial to start arming your strikes out longer and potentially allowing you to change targets. Slot 4, because I'm going for the legendary module with the bomber health, with the emphasis on the dive bombers, I'm going for bomber health. Also, the torpedo bombers have access to that heal, so no need to put any health there. It would be nice to add some health to the rocket planes, which are extremely fragile now, but it is what it is. The rockets are just not very good at this point in time. In slot 5, you have options between Concealment Module and Flight Control, especially with the loss of access to Concealment in the Captain skill tree. But I opt for the extra Flight Control due to the heavily armored nature of the Midway. So if I flick into the armor layout here, you can see that while the sides are quite thinly armored and penetrable by basically all high explosive and armor piercing, the Midway has an impressive 87mm deck, which resists almost all forms of high explosive and almost all forms of armor piercing, as long as you're sufficiently angled and far away. And do note that the Midway also has this aft deck layer, which can do some interesting things for shells that would otherwise penetrate when they hit their sides. But yeah, because of the extreme armor on the Midway, I choose to take the extra regeneration time and +2 dock slots. And last but not least, I'm running the legendary module. Now this is completely optional. I don't think it's mandatory to play Midway at all. It just changes your play style a little bit to emphasize the bombs a little more. Brings up the speed of the dive bombers by 10%, which is pretty nice because the Midway's planes are kind of slow, to be honest. So pushing them to 193 compared to the 170 of the unamplified torpedo bombers is pretty nice. If you don't have that access to the legendary module because you don't have the research bureau points or you didn't grind it prior, then plane speed's always a very safe pick, and plane health is also similarly alright. The Midway is kind of like the average jack of all trades planes when it comes to the carrier trade-offs, but her planes are on the slow side, slower than the Audacious even by a fair margin, with moderate health points, but in exchange she gets access to these powerful munitions. Do keep in mind that with the Tiny Tims loadout, you have 68mm of HE pen on your rockets. And then torpedoes, which are suitable against heavy targets, but even light targets such as that Charles Martel can fall victim if they're not careful. And then 67mm of HE penetration on the Midway dive bombers, which penetrate basically all forms of deck armor that aren't turrets and conning towers and such. So definitely a very flexible carrier. Now I'm running my Ovechkin as my Midway captain still, 19-point captain. So not fully maxed, but this is basically a standard 19-point build. So regeneration time into plane speed, into armor, and survivability expert for aircraft. Followed it up with either bomber flight control or torpedo flight control, depending on what you prefer. For American carriers, probably the bomber flight control first, because American carriers tend to emphasize their dive bombers more than their torpedo bombers. However, following up with proximity fuse after is always a safe choice, and I opt for last gasp. However, for your 1-pointers, you can take anything you want. Now, for a 21-point captain, you have 3 points remaining. So if you chose not to take last gasp, you could take another 4-pointer. However, at this stage in time, there's currently no 4-pointers that are worth taking. Now, do note that there are some reworks coming for some of the plane skills, particularly, I believe, this one. The enhanced reaction support skill, which allows your fighters to lock on much more quickly. Which is removing the minus 25% action time of the consumable. That arrival time bonus, however, or detriment, is still going to be there, so just be careful with it. But for the moment, this is a very standard carrier build. For American carriers, you can finish with a demolition expert, and with Japanese carriers, you can finish with either site stabilization, or you can do torpedo arming and extra improved engine boost. Or if you don't want any of those options, you can go for an extra heal charge and an extra 1-pointer of your choice. But overall, very standard carrier build that can go on any carrier that has access to torpedoes, since this build emphasizes both bombs and torpedoes. Midway is still a brutal killing machine. And nothing about that has changed. Not the most efficient necessarily, but still definitely highly effective. I'm going to throw her back into the matchmaking for one more match just to get a nice even spread of gameplay to show off what the Midway's really made of, but really there's not too much to explain. Her bombs hit hard, her torpedoes hit hard, her rockets hit hard when they hit, but are a little more limited than they have been in the past. So overall, if you couldn't tell, the Captain Rework hasn't really affected carriers that much. Midway being the last of the tech tree bunch that I've covered. We're missing just the MVR now. Just kind of slowly working through these, not going out of my way to kind of rush these out. There's a new tier 10 premium carrier on the horizon, the Maximilian Immelmann, a variant of the MVR, but we'll get to that when the time comes. I'm not going to have the call for that for a bit. Now in this match, again, we're top tier in mixed matchmaking, so 8 to 10 again, an FDR on the enemy team, so my sister ship, but with a very different loadout. Now, the FDR is great in heavy battleship matchups, and there are indeed 5 battleships here, so that's going to be a bit of a pain in the butt for me. Going to have to race with him for damage. I have a superior anti-destroyer lineup, and he does not have any Hollands or any heavy AA ships, so maybe I can swing the balance of the match. Overall, he's slightly favored, nevertheless. But hopefully, I can show off that the Midway, with its great flexibility, is just as capable as the FDR, if not more. Especially when it comes to random battles, where I feel the Midway is actually favored. Was my last game close? I really don't recall. Okay, well, 200,000 damage is not out of the ordinary for an FDR. Now anyway, I'm probing the center for the center spawn destroyer. There are 4 destroyers, but you can see one of mine spawn center, so one of them will have mirrored. Just probing to see if he pushes the center at all. Des Moines, they're showing off how it's one of the... Okay, so that AA tells me exactly where the destroyer is. Des Moines showing off that it's one of the few ships with slightly longer air detectability than AA range, at least for a cruiser. Kitakaze, fairly large destroyer, but you can see the tendency of the Tiny Tims to not really converge that well on even on a target that's completely broadside, not maneuvering, mean that it is quite difficult. Giving him a fairly 4 rockets this time, giving him a nice tap for another 5k, and he's quickly down 9,000 HP. Enemy FDR immediately attacking my Thunderer, covered in 32mm armor. His rockets only have about 33mm of penetration, kind of similar to the Havars of the Midway, however they do a bit less damage. I'm going to move my hull over to this cluster of battleships here because he's likely to attack them repeatedly, and that way I can defend them, with my heavy carrier AA. Searching for that Kitakaze that we wounded. Want to keep him out of the cap, and then we can attack the repub after. Kitakaze still has his AA on. Gonna just try my best to dispatch him. He has very, very limited maneuvering options here, so he almost always has to turn out or move straight, making him a very vulnerable target. Just gonna put the boost on here. Gonna make repeated attacks here anyway, so getting some boost on is gonna be nice. Kitakaze entering as well, but I'm not interested in that one. As much as it would be nice to keep him out of the cap, I'd rather try and kill a target than wound 2. Sadly, he does manage to maneuver out of the way of that one. Not going to have the endurance to make another hit. And sadly, I'm moving away from the cap as well. Daring, not brave enough to push in. Gonna see if I can dent the other Kitakaze now. This guy's kind of stalled out on the corner. See if I can get them to shoot him. Going to try and wound some of these Kitakazes. This one seems to be stopping in a very precarious spot considering my Kitakaze dumped his reload booster in. Don't have boost here. Oh, okay, so he's reversing, so I'm gonna miss this. Gonna have to drop early, try and swing the bombs in. Don't quite get the hit there. He does dodge the torpedoes, have 6 planes left, so don't arm too early. Sadly, my Des Moines radar ends. Gonna be going in blind. I know the approximate location. Those shells go wide. And I do get some blind resets. Gonna keep determinedly going in on these destroyers. The Fantastique over there. Do have to be careful getting too close. My hull is definitely lit up right now, and I'm kind of close to a Bismarck. Okay, he's dead. So now it's just a Thunderer, so the Thunderer can technically threaten me, but unlikely to be a common occurrence. Now my Kitakaze in the center does get dispatched. Not sure how he got radared, maybe by the Des Moines down south over here. There's a Republic trying to slide into the gap, which is interesting at best and foolhardy at worst. I have heal on my torpedo bombers. Not able to get too many more glancing hits onto the Kitakazes, and we lost another ship, which is not great. So let's try and equalize over here on this front. Pop my heal, 2 Kitakazes and a Repub is a formidable amount of AA. Have to kind of remember where he was. Hopefully I did not overlead and can get a good hit in 2 battleships over there. Kitakaze trying to make an exit through the center at the moment. Torpedoes gliding. Got a flood onto the Repub. Stay on target. My carrier hull has moved quite a bit over at this point. Just gonna make a loop, just in case things go south. It's kind of inefficient to attack the opposite side to where your carrier hull is, but this is where the action currently is. AA coming from the Kitakaze, pushing the center still. This is the first guy we attacked, I think. 1 rocket in. Gonna get 1 more attack onto him. Looks like he's not fighting my turn for some reason. Turning back out to meet me, which is odd at best, foolish at worst, and will, in this case, result in his death. Some torpedoes gliding past my hull. Not sure what that is about. Maybe they were from an aircraft carrier, or maybe they're a carrier launched, or sorry, Shimakaze launched. Des Moines kind of peppering me. Don't like that. So I'm gonna give him a piece of my mind. Need to currently turn my hull. He kind of has to bow into the torpedoes here. Or sorry, to my shells here. Clip some flak. Unfortunately, he has defensive fire. So remember to think about your exit plan as well. Okay, don't quite pick the right approach angle. Not too concerned though, I'm mostly turned out at this point. Gonna launch some rockets for that Repub, and the Des Moines gets dispatched. You can see my damage control, carrier damage control, quickly ticking it out. And I'm gonna try and dispatch that Repub in the center. Now he will have gotten his damcon back. It's been a while since we flooded him. But he's fairly alone now. The enemy Vladivostok is, oops, sorry about that, charging in the enemy cap. Gonna see what I can do about that. Now thankfully my Des Moines does manage to dispatch the Vladivostok, going after this Kitakaze as I crest some fires onto the Repub to get a quick snipe off. Enemy destroyer in my cap necessitates that I maneuver my hull again. Don't want to stay still. You can see torpedoes coming. Oh, sorry about that again. You can see that superior maneuverability of my Midway bombers allowing me to pursue quite heavily. Now I wouldn't normally probe this much for a destroyer, but because I saw he was quite low, let's see if I can finish the job for my 4th frag. Only need to land 1 bomb here. My 12,000 alpha bombs, even with French saturation, can easily destroy him. Sadly, he gets away, so I could have spent that time pursuing this Repub, but gonna have to go elsewhere. There are the Shimakaze torpedoes that I was dodging earlier, which is why I turned my hull in that manner. They do range out. They're not 20 kms. They are in fact 12s. At this point, fairly clean. You can see Because I'm spending a lot of time on destroyers, my damage output is much, much lower by comparison. Thunder appears to be pushing. I'm gonna stay behind the island, but you can see I'm gonna have an approach angle from this direction in just a few moments. I think he's reversing or hard stopped, but he's just enough out that I can probably get some hits in. Probably trying to stop. Just pop my heal here, make sure I don't take extenuous amounts of damage. He does extend far enough that I can hit him with 5 torpedoes, which, as we have witnessed, are extremely effective anti-battleship armaments. He's forced to push out because there's another battleship on his side, and this should be lethal, irregardless of what happens. I might not get the kill, but he will die, which is all that I care about. And now we can move on. We have a very low Ventask and an Alaska. So we're going to opt to hunt down the Alaska. Just push my hull in all the way at this point. There's no longer any threat to me. Just the Alaska is the only one who can really attack my hull other than the FDR, and if the FDR chooses to attack my hull in this situation, well, he's going to be in trouble. And, well, apparently he's in big trouble because Conqueror just slapped him out of existence. So fairly heavy AA ship on the Alaska. This guy's obviously not running defensive fire. But still, fairly solid. And you can see versus the normally heavily armored, or relatively heavily armored Alaska, the Midway bombs with their 67mm of penetration have no trouble shredding deck armor. And this relatively inexperienced FDR player is, well, struggling a bit. Double fire and 6 bomb hits to get me quickly caught up in damage, and he's the final target. Not sure if he's gonna last, so I'm just gonna bring my Tiny Tims and quickly dispatch the target. And he's mine. For another quick 4 frag game. Could have been 5, but sadly we didn't pick up the Fantastic kill. So this time a bit lower. We just spent a much more extensive amount of time hunting destroyers, and so you'll note that the bomb and rocket damage is much likely very much higher than the torpedo damage this match. 120,000, 8 torpedo hits, 16 bomb hits, 19 rocket hits, 2 planes shot down by hull. Didn't actually end up being able to use our hull as an AA platform because when we got close there were some battleships that were quite close which forced us to turn away. That's one of the disadvantages of having 15-4 detection. Nevertheless, still 2 hull shutdowns, so we did something. 7 in caps, 4 kills, 9 fires, and 2 floods, and 2 defended ribbons. Last time we were 1600 base experience. Do note that this time we're a bit higher at 1700, even though we're 30,000 damage less. If you flip over to the detailed report, you can see, as we anticipated, much less torpedo damage this time. Much more even balance and a bit of dot damage. The Midway, while not being technically designed as a dot carrier, is perfectly capable of doing damage over time with fires and floods. And there you have it, 2 quick Midway games showing off 2 relatively different sides of the Midway's capabilities. One as an anti-heavy surface ship, and one more emphasizing her dive bombers to hunt destroyers. Overall, if you're looking for a tier 10 carrier to grind, she is a safe pick for random battles. If you're looking for competitive, I would recommend you grind the Hakuryu. It's a very balanced safe pick that's slightly better in competitive because of some various factors, such as her armor-piercing dive bombs and such. But if you're looking for just a random battles carrier, Midway is it. She is the darling of carrier players, myself included, by far my most played tier 10 carrier. Simply because she's capable of attacking any target she wants to, with whatever plane is suitably necessary, whether it be torpedoes, dive bombers, or rockets. One more tier 10 left to review for now. Not going to be able to get the Immelmann, but look forward to that Manfred von Richthofen in her nerfed state review soon enough. Hope you enjoyed, and I will catch you all later. Cheers.